I was always the type to keep my head down and focus. Growing up, my family wasn't particularly well off, and my parents made it clear that education was the only path to a better future. I took that to heart, working tirelessly to excel in school, to secure scholarships, to achieve what others might have taken for granted. By the time I reached college, I was set on a path: graduate with honors, find a stable job, and make my family proud. Romance? That felt like a distraction, a luxury for people with fewer worries. But then, I met Liam. It happened in my first semester, during a group project for one of our classes. I still remember the first time he walked in, confidently introducing himself to everyone. He wasn't conventionally handsome, but there was something magnetic about him, a quiet confidence, a way of making everyone feel like they were his friend. When he turned to me with that easy smile, something stirred in me that I hadn't felt before. Initially, I kept my distance. I was busy with classes, a part-time job, and trying to stay on top of everything. But Liam seemed to find reasons to talk to me. We'd sit together during group meetings, and I'd catch him glancing at me with a warmth in his eyes that made my cheeks burn. He'd ask me about my studies, my goals, and he listened like every word I said mattered. I started looking forward to our project meetings, even though I wouldn't admit it to myself at the time. One day, after a particularly long study session, he suggested grabbing coffee. "Come on," he said, flashing that mischievous smile. "You can't study all the time. Let's take a break." I hesitated but eventually agreed. We walked to a small cafe just off campus, and that's where everything began to shift. Our conversation started light, class assignments, future plans, but slowly, it deepened. I found myself sharing things I hadn't told anyone at school: my family struggles, my dreams of making a difference, my fear of failing. He listened, really listened, in a way that made me feel safe, understood. For the first time, I felt like someone saw past the layers I hid behind, saw me. After that night, we were inseparable. Late-night study sessions turned into long walks around campus, sharing secrets, and whispered dreams about the future. He'd talk about his passions, his desire to build something meaningful, and I could see the fire in his eyes as he described his vision. I loved that about him, that he wasn't content to just exist, that he wanted more from life. His ambition matched mine, and we started talking about our futures as if they were already intertwined. Being with him was like discovering a part of myself I didn't know existed. He had this way of making everything feel lighter, of reminding me that life wasn't just about responsibilities and expectations. He brought out a version of me that laughed more freely, dreamed more boldly. And he'd look at me with this intense focus, as if I were the most fascinating person he'd ever met. In those moments, I believed it too. Our relationship deepened over the next couple of years, each milestone bringing us closer. He was there for my successes, cheering me on when I got a scholarship, celebrating with me when I aced an exam. And I was there for his, supporting him when he faced setbacks, helping him through sleepless nights and self-doubt. We were partners, or so I thought, two people bound by dreams and loyalty, ready to face the future together. We'd spend hours talking about someday. Someday, we'd graduate and move to a new city, find jobs we loved, and create a life together. We'd talk about traveling, seeing the world, building a life that was uniquely ours. With him, the future felt like a promise, something solid and certain. I let myself believe in that future, trust that he would be by my side, no matter what. As time went on, I became convinced that Liam was my forever. I'd never felt so close to anyone, never trusted anyone like I trusted him. He was my confidant, my best friend, the person I turned to in my darkest moments. And he made me feel like I was enough, as if all the pressure, the weight I carried, was worth it because he saw me, believed in me. By our final year in college, I was juggling more than ever. My family's financial situation had worsened, and I was taking on extra shifts to help them. My stress levels were through the roof, but knowing I had Liam made it bearable. He was my rock, my steady ground. I'd come to rely on him in ways I hadn't realized, counting on him to be there through every high and low. And yet, I had no idea that everything was about to change. By our final year, the demands on my time seemed endless. I'd picked up 2 part-time jobs, one at a bookstore on campus and another tutoring high school students, all while trying to finish my degree and help support my family. Each day felt like a marathon, and by the time I got back to my tiny apartment, all I wanted to do was collapse. But through it all, I'd always counted on Liam's voice at the end of a long day, a reassuring presence that made everything feel a little lighter. But lately, something felt different. At first, I thought it was just me, that maybe the stress was making me paranoid. But with each passing week, Liam felt more and more like a stranger. He'd take hours to reply to my texts, and when he did, his responses were short, almost dismissive. Our usual study sessions turned into brief encounters where he'd be glued to his phone or looking out the window, his mind clearly elsewhere. Every time I tried to ask if something was wrong, he'd brush it off, saying he was just busy or tired. But deep down, I felt the shift, a growing distance that I couldn't explain. One evening, after a long day of work and classes, I reached out to him, hoping we could meet up. I just needed to be with him, to feel that warmth and comfort that only he could bring. But when I called, he barely even let me finish before saying he couldn't make it. "Sorry," he said, his tone flat and emotionless. "I'm just really swamped right now. Liam, please. I feel like we haven't spent time together in weeks," I said, my voice wavering. "Can we just talk? I feel like something's wrong." There was a long pause before he replied, and his words cut deeper than he could have known. "I can't always drop everything, you know? You're not the only one with responsibilities." I felt the sting of his words, a pang of hurt mixed with confusion. This wasn't the Liam I knew, the one who used to be there without question, the one who'd once looked at me like I was his whole world. It was as if he'd become someone else, someone I didn't recognize. After that night, the pattern continued. He was always busy, always tired, always just out of reach. I tried everything I could think of, surprising him with coffee, sending encouraging messages, even showing up unannounced to see if he was okay. But each time, he'd find a way to make me feel like I was burdening him, like my presence was something he had to endure. And then came the day that broke me. It was late on a Friday evening. I had just finished a grueling shift at the bookstore and had spent the rest of the night cramming for an exam. My body ached, and I could feel the familiar weight of stress pressing down on my shoulders, making it hard to breathe. All I wanted was to hear Liam's voice, to have him tell me that everything was going to be okay. I texted him, asking if we could meet up. I even offered to come to him, just to make it easier. But hours passed, and my phone remained silent. I watched as the minutes ticked by, my hope fading with each passing moment. Finally, just as I was about to give up, my phone buzzed. I felt a rush of relief, until I read the message. "We need to talk," he'd written. Something in me sank, an ominous weight settling in my stomach. I tried to ignore the dread, telling myself it was nothing, that maybe he just wanted to clear the air and everything would go back to normal. I quickly texted back, and he agreed to meet me in the little park where we used to spend time together. When I arrived, I saw him standing by the bench where we'd once shared our dreams, our fears, our plans for the future. But now, his expression was unreadable, his eyes distant. I approached slowly, feeling my heart race, a mixture of fear and hope churning inside me. "Liam?" I said softly, searching his face for any sign of the warmth that had once been there. He looked at me briefly, then away, as if he couldn't bring himself to hold my gaze. "I don't know how to say this," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. I felt a lump form in my throat, my chest tightening with every word. "Just say it. Whatever it is, I can handle it." He took a deep breath, and when he finally spoke, his words were like a punch to the gut. I don't think this is working anymore." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me, leaving me suspended in a painful, bewildering void. "What do you mean?" I whispered, my voice shaking. "Liam, we've been through so much. I need you." I thought. I thought you felt the same. He sighed, running a hand through his hair, looking everywhere but at me. I don't know, okay? I feel trapped. You have all this stuff going on, and I can't be there the way you want me to be. I have my own life, my own dreams. I can't keep sacrificing myself. His words sliced through me, each one sharper than the last. Sacrificing himself? I had thought we were a team, that our dreams were intertwined. I had given him every part of myself, trusted him, believed that he was my forever. And now he was standing here, telling me that I was too much. So, you're just giving up? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. After everything we'd been through? He looked down, shuffling his feet, as if he couldn't bear to face the pain he was causing. I'm sorry, he muttered. But I need to focus on myself. I can't be the person you need right now. I felt tears well up in my eyes, my heart shattering into pieces that felt too sharp, too broken to ever be put back together. All the nights I'd spent by his side, supporting him, believing in him, none of it mattered. He was choosing himself over me, over us, leaving me to pick up the pieces of a life I'd built around him. I wanted to scream, to beg him to stay, to remind him of the promises we'd made. But in that moment, something inside me snapped. I realized that no matter how much I loved him, I couldn't make him stay. I couldn't make him be the person I thought he was. Fine, I said, my voice breaking. If that's what you want, then go. He hesitated for a moment, as if he was waiting for me to change my mind, to plead for him to reconsider. But I stood my ground, forcing myself to hold his gaze, to let him see the pain he was causing. Finally, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing alone in the empty park, the echoes of our past lingering in the air. As he disappeared into the darkness, I felt a numbness settle over me, a hollow ache that threatened to consume me. I sank onto the bench, tears streaming down my face, the weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest like a stone. He had been my everything, my future, my heart. And now, he was gone. I sat there for what felt like hours, the world around me fading into a blur. The dreams we'd shared, the promises we'd made, all of it felt like a cruel illusion, something I'd foolishly believed in. I was alone, abandoned, left to face the overwhelming darkness on my own. In the days that followed, I went through the motions of life in a daze. Each morning, I'd wake up, and for a split second, I'd forget. But then reality would crash over me, a fresh wave of pain that left me gasping for air. I'd replay every moment, every conversation, searching for some sign I'd missed, some clue that he hadn't been as committed as I was. But the answers never came. He had left, and with him, he'd taken a part of me I would never get back. The days after Liam left were a blur of numbness and routine. I moved like a ghost through my life, going to work, attending classes, but feeling disconnected from everything around me. Each day felt like a struggle, each moment a reminder of the life I'd once imagined with him. People around me would ask if I was okay, and I'd force a smile, mumbling that I was fine. But inside, I was shattered, barely holding myself together. For a while, it felt like there was no end to the pain. Memories of Liam haunted me wherever I went, the cafe where we'd shared countless coffees, the library where we'd studied together, the park where we'd spent late nights talking about the future. Every corner of campus felt tainted with his absence, and I wondered if I'd ever feel whole again. But slowly, something began to shift. One morning, as I sat alone in my tiny apartment, staring at the empty walls, I realized something: Liam wasn't coming back. No matter how much I wanted him to, no matter how many times I replayed our last conversation in my mind, he had made his choice. He had walked away, and he wasn't coming back. That realization hit me like a cold slap to the face, but it also stirred something else, a flicker of determination. I had survived so much already, years of hardship, endless struggles, nights spent studying when everyone else was out enjoying their lives. I'd built myself from the ground up, and I wasn't about to let someone else's choices define my future. I had dreams, goals, a life to build. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to start focusing on me. I threw myself into my studies and work with a new intensity, determined to push through the pain. I started setting small goals, finishing assignments on time, saving a little extra money, treating myself to something small every once in a while. Each small accomplishment felt like a step forward, a reminder that I was capable of standing on my own 2 feet. Gradually, I began to feel a sense of pride in myself that I hadn't felt before. I wasn't just surviving, I was growing, becoming stronger. I began to reconnect with friends I'd lost touch with during my relationship with Liam, letting them back into my life, allowing them to help me rebuild. My best friend, Emma, became my rock, showing up at my door with coffee or a box of tissues on my darkest days, reminding me that I didn't have to face this alone. Emma and I started a weekly ritual of going out to explore new places around the city. One week, we'd try a new cafe, the next, we'd take a walk in a park I'd never been to. Each outing was a small adventure, a chance to rediscover life without the weight of Liam's absence. Emma would drag me to local art galleries, persuade me to try weird food I'd never heard of, and even got me to sign up for a dance class. I wasn't always enthusiastic about these excursions, but little by little, they helped me remember what it was like to feel alive. One day, during one of our cafe visits, Emma looked at me with a proud smile. "You know, I think I finally see you again," she said softly. "The real you. The one who never gave up, even when things got tough." Her words struck a chord. I realized that, for the first time since the breakup, I wasn't thinking about Liam. I was just me, someone who had dreams, goals, a life that didn't revolve around anyone else. I felt a sense of freedom, a lightness that had been missing for so long. With each passing month, I felt myself growing stronger, more confident. I landed an internship at a company I'd always dreamed of working for, a position that seemed almost too good to be true. The application process had been grueling, and I'd doubted myself every step of the way. But when I received the acceptance email, I felt a surge of pride and accomplishment, a validation of all the hard work I'd put in. This was my achievement, something I had earned on my own, without anyone else's help. The internship turned out to be a turning point in more ways than one. I threw myself into the work, learning everything I could, soaking up knowledge and skills that would carry me forward in my career. My supervisor, a woman named Claire, took me under her wing, recognizing my determination and drive. She'd pull me aside after meetings, offering advice and encouragement, pushing me to reach higher. Claire became a mentor, a role model, showing me the kind of person I wanted to become, strong, resilient, unafraid to chase her dreams. During that time, I met new people, built connections, and began to feel a sense of purpose that was separate from any relationship. I found joy in the small moments, pride in my accomplishments, a quiet satisfaction in knowing that I was building a life that was truly my own. But it wasn't just my career that was transforming, I was changing on the inside too. I began taking better care of myself, physically, mentally, emotionally. I started exercising regularly, learning to cook healthy meals instead of surviving on takeout and caffeine. I even picked up old hobbies I'd abandoned, like painting and journaling. Each day, I felt a little more like myself, a little more like the person I wanted to become. I'd be lying if I said it was easy. There were still nights when the loneliness crept in, when the memories of Liam would resurface, unbidden and unwanted. I'd remember the way he used to hold me, the laughter we'd shared, the plans we'd made. But each time those memories surfaced, I reminded myself that I was stronger than my pain, that I was building a future that was mine alone. One evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, I took out my journal and began to write. I wrote about my journey, the pain, the heartbreak, the growth. I wrote about the person I was becoming, the dreams I was pursuing. And as I filled the pages, I realized something profound: I didn't need anyone else to complete me. I was enough, just as I was. In that moment, I felt a surge of gratitude, for the journey, for the pain, for the lessons I'd learned. Liam had left, but in doing so, he had given me the greatest gift of all, the chance to discover my own strength, to build a life that was truly mine. I was no longer defined by someone else's love or approval. I was defined by my own resilience, my own courage, my own dreams. As the months went by, I found myself smiling more, laughing more, feeling more alive than I had in years. I was surrounded by people who supported me, who lifted me up, who saw me for who I truly was. And for the first time in my life, I felt complete, whole, at peace. It had been over a year since Liam had walked out of my life. A year filled with growth, heartbreak, strength, and quiet moments of peace. I had built something beautiful in his absence, a life that was mine, fully and completely. It was a life that was not dependent on anyone else, a life I had fought for, one small victory at a time. I had embraced my career, my passions, and even my own solitude. For the first time in a long time, I felt at home with who I was. So when I saw him again, I was caught completely off guard. It was a Thursday morning, and I was walking into the local cafe near my apartment, the one I had frequented for months, where I'd found my favorite corner seat by the window. The cafe was quiet, with only a few customers scattered around, and I was looking forward to a peaceful moment to read over some reports for work. I had just made my way to the counter when I heard a familiar voice, a voice I had not heard in over a year. "Sophia?" I froze. The world seemed to pause for a moment. My heart skipped a beat as I turned slowly, almost afraid to face the person who had once been everything to me. There he was, standing at the door, his familiar smile hovering awkwardly at the corners of his mouth. His eyes searched mine, and for a brief moment, I saw a flash of vulnerability that caught me off guard. Liam. He looked different, older, more worn. His hair was shorter, his face more angular, but those eyes, the ones I had once lost myself in, were unmistakable. I didn't know how to react. A part of me wanted to run to him, to fall into his arms and let the past melt away. But the other part of me, the stronger part, reminded me of how far I'd come, how much I had grown in his absence. He stepped forward, hesitant, his hands shoved into his jacket pockets. I didn't expect to see you here," he said quietly. I nodded, still unsure how to respond. The emotions that surged through me were a jumble: shock, confusion, and something else that I couldn't quite place. "It's been a while," I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind inside me. "How have you been?" Liam seemed to hesitate before answering. "I've been okay," he said, and I noticed the way his eyes flickered down, almost as if he were searching for the right words. "I've been figuring things out. And, I heard about your internship. Congratulations." The mention of my internship, a huge milestone for me, was a small, unexpected jolt. He was keeping up with my life? My heart squeezed painfully, a mix of emotions flooding over me. He had walked away without a second glance, yet now he was speaking as though he had been following my every move. "Thank you," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "It's been a good year." There was an awkward silence between us, the weight of the past pressing down on both of us. I wanted to ask him why he had left, why he had thrown everything we'd built away. I wanted to ask him why he thought it was okay to just reappear after all this time, as if nothing had happened. But I didn't. I simply stood there, waiting for him to speak, hoping that the answers I needed would come without me having to ask. Finally, Liam broke the silence. I've been thinking a lot about everything. About us," he said, his voice low, almost regretful. "I know I messed up, Sophia. I was selfish. I let you down when you needed me the most. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I was wrong. I couldn't help but feel a flicker of something, maybe it was anger, maybe it was something else, rise within me." He sounded so sincere, so regretful. But I had spent too many nights crying, too many months rebuilding myself for me to just forgive him because he finally realized what he'd lost. The past year had taught me that I was worth more than that. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my emotions in check. "You were selfish, Liam. You didn't just let me down, you left me when I needed you the most. And I was broken for a long time. I had to pick up the pieces of my life without you. I had to learn to be okay on my own." Liam's face softened, guilt and sorrow etched into every line of his features. "I know. I know, he repeated. And I regret it. Every single day. I was scared, Sophia. Scared of everything we had. Scared of the future. I didn't know how to handle it, so I ran. You didn't just run, Liam, I said, my voice shaking slightly despite myself. You left me. You gave up on us. You gave up on everything we had together without even trying to fight for it. And I don't think you can just show up and ask for forgiveness after all this time. The pain in my chest was sharp, but as I spoke the words, I realized something. I wasn't asking for closure from him. I wasn't looking for him to fix things or make excuses for his actions. I had already found that closure on my own. I had already healed, already moved forward. What I needed, more than anything, was to show myself that I was stronger than the hurt he'd caused me. He looked at me, his eyes searching my face as if looking for something, as if hoping I would say the words he so desperately wanted to hear. Sophia, I'm not asking for you to forgive me, or even to take me back, he said, his voice tight. I just need you to know that I'm sorry. And that I've changed. I took a deep breath, letting the words settle in my mind. The truth was, I had already forgiven him, just not in the way he expected. I had forgiven him not because I thought we had a future together, but because I had learned to forgive myself. I had learned that my worth was not tied to anyone else's actions, and that I didn't need his apology to move forward. The person I had become was enough. You're right, I said quietly. You're sorry. And I hope you've changed. But I'm not the same person I was when you left. I've worked too hard to rebuild myself, to let the past drag me back down. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He nodded slowly, as if understanding what I was saying, the weight of it settling over him. I could see the hurt in his eyes, the realization that I was no longer the person who had once been his whole world. The sadness there was genuine, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a twinge of empathy for him. But I also knew that I had to let him go, for both our sakes. I hope you find what you're looking for, Liam, I said, my voice steady. But I've already found mine. He looked at me, his expression a mixture of sorrow and acceptance. I'm glad you're okay, he said, his voice soft. Really? I gave him a small smile, a smile that wasn't full of anger or sadness, but something more peaceful. I am. Goodbye, Liam. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving the cafe without another word. As I watched him leave, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. It was as if I had closed a door that had been left ajar for too long, and with that final goodbye, I was truly free. The past year had been full of ups and downs, of heartbreak and healing, but in that moment, I realized that I was stronger than I had ever been. I didn't need Liam to complete me. I was already whole. And I was ready to embrace whatever came next. To myself back into my routine. Work, exercise, studying, time with friends, everything felt lighter. I realized just how far I had come in the year since Liam left. I had grown in ways I had never imagined, becoming someone I was proud of, someone who had built her own life without anyone else's help. One evening, after another exhausting day at the office, I sat at my desk, my mind whirling with ideas. I had been toying with the idea of starting my own business for months. It was something I had always dreamed of, but the fear of failure, of not being good enough, had always held me back. But now, I wasn't afraid anymore. The person I was becoming wasn't someone who lived in fear, she was someone who took risks, who embraced the unknown, who believed in her own potential. I opened my laptop, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. For the first time in ages, I felt excited about something. This was mine. This dream. This future. And it was all up to me. I spent the next few weeks researching, making plans, and building the foundation for what I hoped would become a successful business. It wasn't easy. There were moments when doubt crept in, when I questioned whether I was doing the right thing, but each time, I reminded myself of everything I had already overcome. I had survived heartbreak. I had survived being lost. This was just another challenge, another step forward. At work, my confidence continued to grow. My supervisor, Claire, continued to mentor me, pushing me to take on more responsibility, to believe in my skills. I found myself becoming more assertive, more willing to speak up in meetings, to offer my ideas without second-guessing myself. It was like I was shedding the last remnants of my old self, the one who doubted her worth, and stepping into a new version of me, someone who knew her value, who was ready to take on the world. Then one day, I received an unexpected phone call. It was from Emma. Her voice was filled with excitement, and I couldn't help but smile when I heard her say, "Sophia, you're not going to believe this, but I've just been offered a job abroad. In Paris." Paris. The city of dreams, of possibilities. Emma had always talked about wanting to live there, to experience the world beyond the small town we had grown up in. And now, her dream was coming true. "Emma, that's amazing. I'm so happy for you," I exclaimed, my heart swelling with pride for her. She laughed. "I know. But, Sophia, there's something I need to ask you." I sat up straighter, curious. "What is it?" "I want you to come with me," she said, her voice soft but full of conviction. "I know you've got your business to focus on, but I want you to come. We can start fresh. You've worked so hard to get to where you are, and I think this could be the perfect next step for you." The offer hung in the air between us, a dream I hadn't even realized I was ready to chase. Paris. A new city, new opportunities, new beginnings. I had always dreamed of traveling, of experiencing life outside the small town I'd known for so long, but I had never allowed myself to think it was possible. Until now. "I don't know, Emma," I said slowly, my mind racing. "I've worked so hard to get to where I am. My business is just starting to take off, and I don't want to risk it all." Emma's voice softened. "You've done everything on your own, Sophia. You've built your life from the ground up. But you don't have to do it alone anymore. You've got the strength to build something new, somewhere new. Paris is an adventure, and you deserve to take it." I sat there, thinking about her words. The woman I had become was not someone who played it safe. She was someone who took chances, someone who believed in her ability to create a life she loved. And Paris felt like the perfect place to continue my journey. "I'll think about it," I said, my heart beating faster as the excitement began to build. "But, maybe this is exactly what I need." A few weeks later, I found myself standing in the bustling streets of Paris, the city alive with possibilities. Emma had already settled into her new apartment, and I had found a small, but cozy place not far from her. My business was still in its early stages, but I had secured clients from back home who were excited about working with me remotely. Everything felt like it was falling into place, like the universe was pushing me forward, guiding me towards something greater. I spent my days exploring the city, soaking in the culture, the food, the art. I would spend hours walking through the cobblestone streets, losing myself in the beauty of it all. And when I wasn't exploring, I was working, building my business, reaching out to new clients, learning and growing every single day. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was living the life I had always dreamed of. I wasn't held back by the past or the people who had once been part of my story. I was creating a new narrative, one where I was in control, one where my happiness and success were entirely in my own hands. And then, one evening, as I sat in a cafe overlooking the Seine River, I received a message that would change everything. It was from Liam. The message was simple, but its weight was unmistakable. "I miss you. I've thought about you every day since I saw you last. I'm sorry. I was wrong. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." I stared at the message for what felt like hours, the words swirling in my mind. I thought about how far I had come, how much I had grown in his absence. I thought about Paris, about my new life, about the woman I had become. And as I looked out over the city, I realized something: I had no need for closure. I had already let go. I had already moved forward. So I simply closed my phone, put it back in my bag, and let the night unfold around me. I was ready for whatever came next, because I knew that I was enough, and that my story was just beginning.